Okay, good evening, everybody. First off, I apologize for the technical delay. You got to get the AV right. You know, I promised all of my lauding fans out there that this would be recorded, so I don't want to start a mutiny out there in cyberspace. So I apologize for that. Anyhow, for those of you who I know, I'm sorry that you have to listen to me for the next few minutes, but for those of you who don't know, my name is Pinchas Landis. I have the privilege of being the Director of Partners in Torah. And because I have that position, every now and then I get to stand up here and run my mouth a little bit, which is good for a guy like me. I need to get rid of the hot air. So the topic that I wanted to address tonight is a very personal topic. It really speaks to my heart, and it's the topic of miracles. Miracles. The topic we give the talk is, do you believe in miracles? I don't. Yes, you heard it here first. Rabbi Landis does not believe in miracles. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, let me explain to you why we're talking about this now. Now, in truth, you could talk about miracles any day of the week, and it would be a relevant Jewish topic. But we're really in miracle season, because 2 days from now, we'll begin the month of Adar Sheni, the second Adar. And our sages tell us about the month of Adar, Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. That when the month of Adar comes in, we are supposed to increase our happiness. Again, the subtle lesson there is, as a Jew, you always got to be happy, but come the month of Adar, you got to tone it up a bit. You got to scale it up and be more happy. The question is why? So our sages say, now you might think it's because, the holiday of Purim's there. And that's like half the answer. Our sages say it's the juxtaposition of Purim to Pesach. That since we have this back-to-back, this 1-2 punch of the salvation of the Jewish people, first celebrating what happened in Shushan long ago, if you remember the song, right? You remember that one? So in Shushan long ago, that was roughly 350 years before the Common Era, and then 1,000 years before that, we had the Exodus. So the way the calendar works out is we get to celebrate both within a month. So our sages tell us, once the month of the first one starts, really kicking off the season, get happy, because there's something to be happy about. And therefore, we had to be happy about these miracles. So I figured it made sense that we spend a little bit of time tonight talking about miracles, talking about what they mean, and seeing how they are relevant. Let me introduce my feeling about miracles with a story that once happened to a guy that I don't know, because it's not a true story, but I'll make it sound like one. There's a guy driving down the street in a city where there's actually traffic and a lot of cars, not in Cleveland. I grew up in Atlanta. This could have happened in Atlanta. And he's driving down the street and he has a meeting in downtown Atlanta. And anyone ever been to Atlanta here? Well, you know that Atlanta has a lot of traffic, a lot of cars on the street. So sure enough, it took him, the meeting was 20 minutes away. He left himself 45 minutes to get there, and he's running late, and he's rushing, and of course the traffic and everything. Finally, he's getting close to where the meeting is, and he can't find a parking spot anywhere. And he says, what am I going to do? So I guess I got to turn to God now. He says, God, do me a favor. Help me find a parking spot. I got to get to this meeting on time. If I'm late, the whole deal is going to fall apart. You need to make this happen for me. And I promise, if you find me the parking spot, I'll get up tomorrow morning and I'll put on tefillin and I won't speak slander about other people and I'll come to Partners in Torah every week. This is product placement. And, I'll do exactly what you want me to do as a Jew. Please just help me find a parking space. Right then, all of a sudden, right in front of him, a car pulls out right in front of the building that he's in. He's got a space right there. He pulls in and says, no thanks, God. I got it from here. And that's how many of us often deal with miracles. And honestly, as we go on, you'll see that story represents why Landis doesn't believe in miracles. Now let's jump to that second celebration we're going to have, the celebration of Pesach, and I'll paint the exact same picture, but put it biblical for you, so to speak. First plague happens, right? First plague, now the way that all the plagues work, you read about in the Torah, it's not so clear, but the commentators expound on it for us, and they tell us that each plague had its own month. So if you do your math, the 10 plagues took 10 months. The way that it worked was Moses warned Pharaoh for 3 weeks that the plague was coming, and then the plague went into effect for a week. So each plague has a week. So what's the first plague? The first plague is dung, blood, right? It's the dung plague. So the blood comes, Moses warns him for 3 weeks. He says, Pharaoh, watch out. all the water is going to turn to blood. If you want to take a bath, get it now. If you want to get a drink, get it now, because you're not going to have any water to bathe in or any water to drink once this plague gets here. And all of a sudden the plague comes, and it's terrible. All the water in all of Egypt turns to blood. Unless it was owned by Jews, then it stayed as regular water, which answers the obvious question that how long can a human being survive without water? About 2 to 3 days, right? About 2 to 3 days. With food, I think you can go a week, but what, we have any doctors in the room? So, doctor in the house? 1 second, is this a Jewish event? Anyhow, so I believe a person can last 2 to 3 days without water, and therefore one of the answers is how they survive a week. Well, they were able to purchase water from the Jews. So all the Egyptian water turns to blood, and the only way they could get water that would stay as water is to actually purchase it from the Jews whose water did not turn into blood. This also gives us an explanation for something else. So Pharaoh, who's been warned about this for 3 weeks, finally it happens. Moses and Aaron come and say, so, you going to let us go? Pharaoh says, I don't know. Let me bring in my sorcerers over here. Hey guys, can you turn water to blood? Sure, we can turn water to blood. Watch us do it. Hey Moses, here's $10. Give me that water. Okay, here's the water. Now we're going to turn it to blood. Right? So the Torah says they also turned water to blood, and therefore Pharaoh wasn't impressed. But who has your $10 now? That's like the rest of the story, because how did they turn the water to blood if all the water was already blood? The answer is they had to buy it from the Jews because they couldn't turn it from blood back to water. They had to buy it from the Jews to turn to blood. So if you're Pharaoh, right, you see that all the water in your land is turned to blood. No one can drink. No one has the ability to turn that blood from water. And yeah, okay, your sorcerers can go out and buy water from a Jew and then turn it to blood. What do you say? No, thanks God, I got it from here. Don't worry. Right? And that's what Pharaoh said. Pharaoh said, oh, as long as I have something to hang my hat on, that this is something besides God, that this is something else here, that I don't have to become a believer, that I don't have to let the Jews go, I'm fine. Go ahead. Give me the second plague. Bring it on. I'm ready for some frogs over here. Right? I think Pharaoh was a frog lover or something like that. Anyhow, so that's what happens. And when we fast forward to the to the 10th plague, we can understand a verse in the Torah with this idea. The 10th and most cataclysmic of all the plagues was Makos Bechoros, the slaying of the firstborn, which basically meant that anyone who could somehow fit into the category of a firstborn, meaning if they were firstborn to their father, if they were firstborn to their mother, if they were just the firstborn in the house at that time, if they once met a firstborn, whatever it was, as long as they could somehow be a firstborn, they died on that night. Okay? When Moses gives that 3-week warning to Pharaoh, what does he say? He says the plague is going to come ke chatzos halayla, which literally means around midnight. Like, this is God we're talking about over here, and Moses' servant. Don't you think he'd be a little more exact and go and say, it's going to happen at midnight? Why does Moses say, around midnight, the slaying of the firstborn is going to happen? You know why? Because he was worried that the Egyptians would not have those subatomic clocks on the wall like we have now, and he knew it was nighttime so their sundials wouldn't work, and he was worried that they wouldn't be able to tell time, and he didn't want them to come back to him and say, Moses, you said it was going to happen at midnight. It didn't happen at midnight. So picture the scene. You're in Egypt. It's the night of the Seder, if you're Jewish, and if you're Egyptian, it's the night of the slaying of the firstborn. And you know that Moses has been warning about this for 3 weeks. And Moses has a little bit of credibility at this point because 9 plagues have already come before this and happened almost exactly the same way that Moses said they were going to happen. And you're sitting there, and you're counting, and you're looking at I don't know what you're looking at, but you're looking at something to count down, and you say it's 10, 9, 8, and all of a sudden you hear, ah! And a scream goes out from the house next door, and ah! There's a scream from the house next to you, and ah! There's a scream from upstairs, Ahmed's dead, Muhammad's dead! And you're still sitting there, wait 1 second, 4, 3, 2, 1, oh Moses, you're off by 4 seconds, I'm sorry, we don't believe in you. But that's what he was worried about, because he knew human nature. The miracles are great, but as long as you got something to hang your hat on that says, maybe this is not the Almighty, maybe this is not supposed to send me a message, then human nature, especially if you're Egyptian, but even for the rest of us, human nature will force us to do it. You know, it's interesting. One of my favorite things to do, and I don't get to do it often enough, is argue with an atheist. Now, I don't get to it often enough because most people I think are not atheists. Most people I think are at least agnostic, which means they're not sure if we can prove there's a God, or they're believers. But an atheist means that you believe that there is no God. You believe that no way, no shape, no form, there is no God. And here's how it goes when, once in a blue moon, and it usually happens, it's either someone who is very smart and intellectual, has done a lot of studying, and therefore I don't do this. But usually when it happens, it's like a teenage kid. Usually he's trying to shake up his parents and his teachers, so he comes and says, yeah, I'm an atheist. And I say to him, really, you're an atheist? So I guess you'll agree with me, there's a pretty serious question, like whether or not there's a God, right? Yeah. And so I assume that you've studied this question and thought about it and looked into this question, right? Well, I don't know. So, maybe you've read some classical philosophy, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates? No. Medieval philosophy, something. Thomas Aquinas, maybe, something? No. Modern philosophy, Spinoza, anything? No. Jewish philosophy, Maimonides, Yehuda Levi? No. Have you ever read the Bible? Well, I had a bar mitzvah and I read something about this big. So basically you're telling me that you're an atheist. You've never studied Greek philosophy, you've never studied medieval philosophy, you've never studied modern philosophy, you've never studied Jewish philosophy, you've never read the Bible from cover to cover. Excuse me, you're not an atheist, you're an idiot. And that's how most people look at it. Like, you know what, I'm just going to decide that there's not a God. And therefore, whatever it takes, no way, no shape, no form, my belief system is there's no God. And there is nothing you can do to convince me to change my mind. You want to bring blood, you want to slay the firstborn, you want to give me a parking spot in front of a building. There is no way you are going to convince me because I know. I know. There's a rabbi, a very well-known rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Refson. Rabbi Refson, I believe he's retired now, but he used to head a girls' school called Neve Yerushalayim. And he was once speaking at a conference on science and religion in England. He's British. And before him, there was some certain physicist or scientist that spoke before him. It was an astronomer, actually, who spoke before him. And he said his piece on astronomy, and he introduces his talk and saying, I know we're at a science and religion conference, and I don't know much about religion, but I think you can sum it up as just be good to your neighbor. And he went off with his speech about astronomy. So Rabbi Refson gets up, he's about this tall, got a big beard, has a beautiful British accent, and he says, I didn't know much about astronomy, but I believe it can be summed up as twinkle, twinkle, little star. So I believe that's how many people take belief. And therefore, if that's how you take belief in whether or not there's an Almighty, whether or not He gave the Jewish people the Torah, whether or not He expects anything from us, if you take that seriously, you take it seriously. But if you don't take it seriously, no miracle is going to change your stance because you're convinced that you got it all figured out. And that, therefore, is why I don't believe in miracles. What does belief mean? Belief means that you invest in a system, that you think the system is accurate, that you think it's going to work. And miracles say that this is going to prove miraculous things. Well, we can't define a word with a definition, but anyways, this is going to prove unbelievable things, prove there's an Almighty, and it doesn't work. Miracles don't work. And I'll prove it to you. Another, being a rabbi is a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. It's no job for a nice Jewish boy, but it's still a lot of fun. One of the questions you get a lot when you're talking to people about belief and religion is, you know why I don't believe? And you know why I do what I do? And you know why I da. Because there's no miracles. If there was a miracle today, then I'd be a believer. And my answer is no, you wouldn't. And really the Almighty and His infinite wisdom came to that decision Himself. Jewish history has gone in three cycles. You had the time period of miracles, which lasted roughly 800 years, from the time the Jews left Egypt until they came back to, or 900 years, until they came back to build the Second Temple. During the Second Temple, you had a quasi-miraculous time. You had some things that were somewhat miraculous. That's when the Hanukkah story happened. It was a close relationship. Jews living in Israel had the temple, but not what we would call an open, clear relationship. Then when the Second Temple was destroyed, we're basically on our own to figure it out ourselves. As if the Almighty has said to us throughout history, you want open miracles? You want to have a situation where it's clear that you have a relationship? That's the first 900 years of Jewish history. You could go to the temple. The Mishnah tells us that the temple had 10 constant miracles going on all the time. We had prophets at that time. If you wanted to get an insight into how the Almighty looked at the world, you could go talk to a prophet. At the time period of the Second Temple, we became a non-profit organization, and that was over. But that's what you had. And you know what happened during that first temple time period? Jews still goofed off. Jews still didn't believe. Jews still did whatever they wanted and really didn't care. And they could just answer off everything in any direction they wanted. And I'll tell you such a story. One of my favorite stories in the whole entire Tanakh and the whole entire Jewish Bible, it's the story of Elijah. You know, you talk to people and every now and then you get a question like, who's your favorite biblical character? And some people say like, Moses, he overcame all his challenges, he led the Jewish people. Or, David, he was a musician. I like Eliyahu, I like Elijah because of the story that I'm about to tell you. He was like a vicious guy, and he just put his foot down where it needed to be put down. Let me tell you the story of Elijah the prophet. By the way, we're all familiar with Elijah, right? We know that he shows up a few times a year. When does he show up? Passover, and at Bris Milah, at a circumcision. We have a chair for Eliyahu, a chair, Elijah's chair, and he's also going to be the one to herald in the coming of the Messiah. Those are his 3 jobs in history. We're going to see now how he got those jobs. So after King David passed away, or after King Solomon passed away, the kingdom of Israel divides into 2. There was a big fight. Solomon's son Rehoboam didn't do such a good job in leadership. One of the rabbinical leaders, Yerovam ben Nevat, decided he was going to split away. It was sanctioned by the Almighty, and he takes 10 out of the 12 tribes and builds the kingdom of, Israel. It was Israel, because if you have 10 out of 12, that's a majority. Majority rules. He took the name. And there was just Judah and Benjamin left in the south. They had Jerusalem. They had the temple. And that's what happens. Now, during the whole first temple time period, you had all these miracles going on, and you read about in the south, you basically bounce back and forth between like a good king, a bad king, a good king, a bad king, but a lot of people ignoring those constant miracles. The northern kingdom was a totally different story. In the northern kingdom, there were a total of 20 kings over the course of about 200 years. And each one was worse than the next. Each one was more idolatrous than the next. Each one was more far from what the Almighty wanted from the Jewish people than the next. But they were living in a time period of open miracles, and you had prophets, and in comes Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet's original job was to be the prophet to the northern kingdom. So if you have a tough prophet, you got to give him the tough kingdom, right? The southern kingdom was a lot easier, but the northern kingdom was more vicious. So Elijah's job is to try and straighten out things in the northern kingdom. When Elijah's tenure began, the king of the northern kingdom at that time was somebody by the name of Achav. Now the book of Kings tells us, this is Kings 2, but the book of Kings tells us that Achav was the 8th king of the northern kingdom, and he was the worst up until that point. So basically they just got worse and worse and worse until you get to Achav, who has a reputation of being the worst of the worst. And the Tanakh tells us that he did like everything bad that he could do in the eyes of the Almighty. He was just totally despicable. Now, one of the things that he did, which was not highly recommended, not so smart, is that he married a very evil woman. And there's a nice Jewish concept of that the man is the head of the family, but the woman is the neck of a family, and she can turn the head any way she wants. Okay, I think that comes from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, but the truth is our sages say the same exact thing. Our sages say, Chachmas Nashim Bansa Besa, that the wisdom of woman builds the house. And that's why we could go into a whole discussion about this, maybe for another time. That's why Judaism is determined by the women, because we know that whatever the woman is, that's what the house is going to be. And Achav did not marry very well. He married a very evil woman by the name of Jezebel. Now, Jezebel was not Jewish herself. She was from a neighboring country called Sidon. And not only was she not Jewish, but she was deeply involved, like she was a really, really, really frum idol worshiper. She was very into 2 types of idols. One idol was called the Baal. It was a famous idol back in the days, back before Billy Idol. It was the idol of Baal. And the other one was the Asherah tree, turning trees into idols. That's what she was into. And she influenced her husband, and they made it that the whole northern kingdom was involved in worshiping the Baal and worshiping the Asherah tree. But it wasn't exactly what you think. Because on the surface, you read about this and say, okay, they were what we would call off the derech. They had left Judaism. They were Baal. They were Asherah. That's what they were doing. But it was a much different situation. We're going to see that Elijah has to hide out at 2 different times. The first time he hides out, he's hiding from Achav, because Achav wants to kill him. He's sustained by birds who bring him food every day. our sages tell us, where does that food come from? It came from the palace of Achav. It's like the joke's on him. He's hiding out from Achav, trying not to get killed, and he's being sustained by food from Achav's palace. But you can ask a question. Eliyahu is a prophet. A prophet means like a great rabbi, means a very pious guy. What was he doing eating food from the house of an idol worshiper? So the answer is, his house was glatt kosher. Right? The palace of Achav, with worshipping the Baal, with worshipping the Asher, was a glatt kosher house. Not only that, but Achav always went to shul on Shabbos, and he always went to the temple of Baal on Sunday. He was basically Jews for Baal. That's how it's described by our sages. That was what they did. And by the way, archaeology has backed this up, because there's archaeological digs in the north today where you'll have two altars on either side of the street. One will have the emblem of an idol on it, and the other one will be blank. So archaeologists concluded that this was at that time period when idol worship was prevalent, and this was the altar to the idol, and this was the altar to God, to Hashem, to the Jewish God. So that's what the religion was. Yes, they were very involved in idol worship. It was like this quasi-Jewish idol mix, and that's what they had going on. And that'll be relevant in a moment. So what happens is Eliyahu says, okay, enough's enough. Achav's no good, Jezebel's no good, we have to do something about these people. Elijah says, I'm a prophet, I know what I'm doing, so here's what I'm going to do. You know, if you can't win them with honey, you win them... No, it's the other way, right? I'm sorry, but right? He says, I'm going to beat them down to submission until they start believing that there is one God and that idol worship is worthless. And what does he do? He makes a famine. He makes it that all the rivers dry up, all the wells dry up, there's no water anywhere in the northern kingdom. And this famine lasts for a day, a week, a month, a year, 3 years the famine lasts. He knows how to break people, right? So finally, after 3 years, the Almighty tells Elijah, he says, Elijah, 3 years is long enough. Let's go. Yeah, I think they're ready to, I think you broke them. Let's go talk to Achav, let's go talk to the Jewish people. So Achav goes out for a walk looking for some water. Elijah goes out for a walk looking for Achav, and you know how things go. They bump into each other, and they start accusing each other. Achav says to, or Eliyahu says to Achav, he says, oh look, it's the troubler of Israel. You're the one who brought this famine. To which Achav says, no, you're the troubler of Israel. You're the one who really made it happen. No, you're the one. No, you're the one. Right? They have this great shouting match about who really was behind the famine. And finally Elijah says, okay, you know what? Stop. We're not getting anywhere here. Let's do this right. Let's really settle this once and for all. We're going to have a duel. Right? We're going to have a duel. Now, it's not going to be Eliyahu and Achav with guns walking 10 paces, turn on and shooting. What he said is, I want you to go get 450 of your priests of Baal and bring them to Mount Carmel. You know, now they have the winery there. It's beautiful. Bring them to Mount Carmel, and 400 priests of the Asherah tree, bring them up on the mountain, and I'm going to come up on the mountain. So look, odds are in your favor. It's 850 to 1. Right? I'm giving you all the odds. Like, bet the house on it. Vegas is, Eliyahu was the underdog by far. He said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring 2 cows. And your 850 men, they can choose which cow they're going to use. And we're going to slaughter that cow, and we're going to each make a little altar. And the altar's going to look like this. It's going to have wood, it's going to have the cow, and that's it. What are they missing? Fire. And that's how we're going to see who's right. You can't bring matches, you can't bring a Zippo, you can't bring any of that. We're going to bring wood, we're going to bring the animal, and then they're going to use their idol worship, and I'm going to use what I got, and we'll see who's right. And Eliyahu even let them go first. They won the toss and they went first. And the 450 priests of Baal and the 400 priests of Asherah get up there and they start doing their stuff, whatever it is that they do, dancing around and doing what idol worshippers do. And, the minutes go on, the hours go on. All of a sudden it's midday. It's been about 3-4 hours. Nothing's happened. So Eliyahu, being the very sensitive, humble guy he is, he says to the priests of Baal, says, maybe your guys can't hear you. Maybe you should speak louder. Maybe they're in the bathroom. Maybe they're getting something to eat. You got to maybe speak louder. Maybe that's the problem over here. And they start yelling a little bit louder. And then he says, well, maybe you should start, I don't know, cutting yourself. Maybe that'll work and something will happen. And that doesn't work. And before you know it, it's completely clear that the priests of Baal are complete charlatans. By the way, our sages tell us, this isn't in the book of Kings, but our sages tell us that they also snuck in fire. They actually did sneak in fire, and that didn't work either. So 850 idol-worshipping priests can't do a thing. Now Elijah did a test. He tested out the Jewish people before the day began. And he said a very profound question to the Jewish people. He said, Ad masai atim poschim al shnei seifim. How long are you going to sit on two sides of the fence? Im Hashem Elokeichem l'chu acharav. If the Almighty is your God, go after Him. V'im habal l'chu acharav. And if the Baal is your God, go after him. Right, Elijah was teaching us a profound lesson in that demand, during that question. He wasn't saying stop idol worship. So you can't have it both ways. If you believe in the Almighty, stick with the Almighty. If you believe in idol worship, go to idol worship. You can't have it both ways. Right? That's not how it works over here. And that's what he asked the Jewish people before the day began, and no one budged. So it's midday. The priests of Baal have clearly failed. Nothing has happened. Elijah says, okay, my turn. Bring up a jug of water. Dump it on my wood. Bring up another jug of water. Dump it on my wood. Bring up a third jug of water and dump it on my wood. He made a whole pond around his altar to make it very clear that unlike the priests of Baal who tried to sneak in fire, there was no fire here whatsoever. And he looks up to the heavens and he says three words. He says, Aneni Hashem Aneni. Answer me, God, answer me. And all of a sudden the fire comes down from heaven. It burns up the calf. The Jewish people are standing there in awe. In awe, they say, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim, which, by the way, are the three words we say now at the end of Yom Kippur, which means that the Almighty is the one and only God. The Almighty is the one and only God. And all of a sudden, the Jewish people were on the side of Elijah. He won. He has the 850 priests slaughtered. Like I say, he's a very sensitive guy. And Eliyahu thinks, okay, job's done. Took me 3 years. Took me one tough day on Mount Carmel. But we got the job done. We have eradicated idol worship in the Jewish people and the kingdom of Israel for good. Until Queen Jezebel finds out about it. Queen Jezebel didn't show up for the event for whatever reason. She had to get her hair done. She shows up, she hears about it, and she sends a message through one of her sentries to Elijah. She says, Elijah, bravo, you won, 10.0, the trophy's yours, you did it, but don't worry, we're going to kill you tomorrow. What do you mean you're going to kill me tomorrow? I won! I have the whole Jewish people on my side. They all said Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem, they all said they believe. Why are you going to kill me tomorrow? She said, very simple. They believe in it now, but give it a day, it's going to wear off. To which Eliyahu said, you're right. And he runs away once again. He goes out into the desert, doesn't take food this time, doesn't take water, doesn't want any miracles or ravens bringing him bread from the palace. Says, I'm done. I'm done. Jezebel's right. She's won. The Jewish people are forsaken. There's nothing to do here. I did all I got. I made the biggest show that I had, and I just can't do it anymore. I retire. I'm done. I'm dying here. At which point, of course, the Almighty comes to him and says, Eliyahu, let me teach you a lesson. And he brings this big tornado, and it just gushes by and shakes everything up, and the trees start flying, and it's like Wizard of Oz right before him. And then everything comes down. And God says, you like that? He goes, no. He says, okay. And he makes a big earthquake, and the earth opens up, and things fall in. And it's like the biggest earthquake you've ever seen. You like that? It's okay. And then the Almighty makes a big fire and everything gets consumed up into ashes and everything's gone. And Elijah's like, God, what are you doing? He says, I'm teaching you a lesson. I'm not hidden in the wind. I'm not hidden in the earthquakes. And I'm not hidden in the fire. You know where you find me? You find me in the kol demama daka. You find me in that quiet, constant whisper. That's where you find the Almighty. You don't find Him in big miracles. We don't believe in big miracles because they don't work. The Jewish people did it for 900 years. Worthless. It doesn't get you anywhere. Might be serve a purpose and it might have a place and time. But that's not where commitment and belief come from. That comes from that kol demama daka. And that's how the Jewish people are going to survive. So Eliyahu, here we are, roughly 500 years before the Common Era. And you watch. You're going to be wrong. And I'm going to prove it to you. Because every single time a new Jewish baby is born, a baby boy is born, and his parents bring him into the covenant of Abraham, you're going to be there to witness it. To show that the Jewish people never give up on me. They keep that silent whisper. And we're going to even set a chair for you, just to rub it in. And every year, when the Jewish people celebrate the beginning of their nationhood, you're going to show up there too. We're going to pour a cup for you. We're going to open the door for you. You got a rough life. Like that night, you got to run to 8 million Jewish people all across the world. Like, good luck with that. 16 million people, whatever it is. And then in the end of days, when all comes to its fruition, and the Messiah comes, you're going to be the one to announce his coming, eating a big piece of humble pie, saying, I was wrong. You can't forsake the Jewish people. You can forsake miracles, because they don't work. But you can't forsake the kol demama daka, that constant, quiet voice that the belief of the Jewish people is based on. And therefore, Eliyahu shows up these 3 times in history. He was given one of these special statuses, that he ascended to heaven and became an angel. Most of us, when we leave this world, our body stays here on earth, and our souls go up to the world of souls. But a few people get this special thing that they become an angel. And that's why when Elijah comes to Bris, we refer to him as Eliyahu Malach HaBris, Elijah, the angel of the circumcision. Because his job is to sit there and say, you know what? I was wrong. There's no giving up on the Jewish people. But my approach was wrong on how you do it. And the same idea is brought down in another place. There's a book called the Ein Yaakov. It collects all the homiletic teachings of the Talmud into one book. And in the introduction, they bring down a medrash. And the medrash asks a question. And the question is, what is the one verse of the entire Torah that sums up all of Judaism? What is that one verse? And the Medrash brings down the opinion of 3 rabbis. The first rabbi says, the one verse that sums up the whole entire Torah and all of Judaism is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. That's one opinion. The second opinion is V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You have to love your friend as yourself. That's the second opinion. The third opinion is Esa keves achad ta'aseh baboker, ve'esa keves hasheni ta'aseh b'bein ha'arbayim, which means that when the temple stood, we would bring 1 sheep in the morning as the morning offering, and we would bring a second sheep in the afternoon as the afternoon offering. And the Medrash concludes that that third choice is right. That this verse of 1 sheep in the morning, 1 sheep in the afternoon, that sums up what it means to be a Jew. And that's the lesson I'll leave you with today. Thank you very much. You go home and tell your friends that you learned that, being a Jew is all about being a sheep in the morning and a sheep in the afternoon. What's the lesson here? It's describing what's called the Korban Tamid. The sacrifice, and I hate the word sacrifice because it's a bad translation of the Hebrew word. The Hebrew word korban means to come close. It was an action that brought the Jewish people and the Almighty close together. There was something called the Korban Tamid. Tamid means all the time. Every single day. 7 days a week. Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos, no matter what, they brought that Korban Tamid, 1 sheep in the morning, 1 sheep in the afternoon. It represented one of the most consistent things that Jewish people do and have ever done. Therefore, the Medrash is teaching us that that is the lesson of what it means to be a Jew. Be consistent. Do the things you do in the morning and the evening. Pick what you do. Pick what your commitment is. But do it consistently. Because that's the kol demama daka. That is that quiet voice that's whispering, that's telling us, this is what it means to be a Jew. This is how we're supposed to be. And that is the essence of a Jew. Elijah got it wrong. It's not about the big miracles. It's not about the pomp and circumstance. It's about that sheep in the morning and the sheep in the afternoon. The consistency. For those of you who are here for my last talk, you heard this point before, but it's one of my most favorite quotes, and it's a question and answer given by Rav Yaakov Emden. Rav Yaakov Emden was a 17th century German rabbi, and in the introduction to his prayer book, he asked a question about miracles. He says, what is the greatest miracle that has ever taken place in world history? And he goes through some of these miracles that we've mentioned, and we talk about these miracles often. Was it the 10 plagues in Egypt? He says no. Was it the splitting of the sea? He says no. Was it the Jews in Mount Sinai? No. Was it the 10 constant miracles in the temple? No. Was it Elijah on Mount Carmel? No. Was it Purim? No. Was it Hanukkah? No. What is the greatest miracle that has ever taken place in world history? Says Rav Yaakov Emden in the 1700s, in the 18th century, he says it's the fact that the Jewish people are still here practicing Judaism. That is the greatest miracle of world history. Much greater than Eliyahu Bahar Carmel, Elijah on Mount Carmel. Much greater than it all. The fact that we kept that sheep in the morning, that sheep in the afternoon, that kol demama daka, that consistency, day in, day out, when it's hard, when it's easy. That is what gave the Jewish people survival. And if he wrote that in the 18th century as the greatest miracle that ever happened, as we say in rabbinical talk, kol v'chaimer bein benosho kol v'chaimer, all the more so on top of all the more so, does that miracle become greater every single day and is so great today. Because look, the nations of the world have not made it easy on us. It's not like we just did our kol demama daka, we kept our little constant voice, and they just said, okay, go ahead, do your thing. No, we did this in the face of Hitler, we did this in the face of Khmelnytsky, we did this in the face of the Cossacks, we did this in the face of the Greeks, we did this in the face of the Romans, we did this in the face of the Crusaders, we did this in the face of everybody. There's some amazing Jewish commentators in general. They're all great. They don't need my approval, but they're all great. But one of the great Jewish commentators is somebody called the Taz. the Shach, the Sifsei Kohanim. This is one of the commentaries on the Code of Jewish Law on the Shulchan Aruch. And it's a great commentary, very concise, very clear. We all have to use it regularly in our rabbinical ordination. And you read it, and you think that he must have been sitting on a beach somewhere drinking a martini when he was writing this commentary. And then you learn the history of the Shach, and you find out that he was running from the Cossacks, running from Khmelnytsky as he was writing that commentary. And then what about Rashi? Everyone knows Rashi, right? The acronym Rashi, one of the things it means is Rabban Shel Yisrael, the rabbi of the Jewish people. He's called that because he wrote that beautiful commentary on the Chumash, beautiful commentary on Tanakh, beautiful commentary on the Talmud. He is the rabbi of every single Jewish person. Again, you read it, look how prolific of a writer he was. Look at the amazing things he did. You think he was just sitting in France sipping a nice Bordeaux or whatever it is, and because he was a vintner, that's what he did for a living, and you think that was his life. And then you read the history and realize that he lived at the same time as the Crusaders. And he was constantly running from the Crusaders. In fact, one of the head Crusaders by the name of Godfrey de Bouillon actually threatened him. He asked him before he went on his crusade to Jerusalem if he was going to be successful in his crusade. To which Rashi responded, not only are you not going to be successful, you're only going to come back with 2 horses. And Godfrey says, okay, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to go and get rid of all the infidels in Israel. I'm going to kill a few Jews on the way. And when I get back, I'm going to prove to you you're wrong, and then I'm going to kill you. And by the way, there was no El Al in those days. It took time to get from France to Israel to do a crusade. It was a couple years. Finally, Godfrey comes back. He didn't do so well in the Crusades, but he had 3 horses. So he's on his way back to Troyes, to the city where Rashi lived. He walks through the city gates. As he's walking through the city gates, a stone falls off the gate and kills one of his horses. 2 horses left as he enters the city of Troyes. And as Rashi was living through that, he was writing these amazing commentaries and doing these amazing things. We're very lucky. We have our challenges as the Jewish people. Just turn on your Twitter feed. I don't recommend it, but turn on your Twitter feed, turn on the news, whatever it is. You hear about many statements of anti-Semitism going on in the world, many actions of anti-Semitism going on in the world. Just look at the Israeli news and you want to cry, either because of the politics of it or what's going on in Gaza. Whatever it is, we have our challenges nowadays. But you know what? We've gotten this far. And there's a plan to it all. It's all supposed to lead to something. And when we get there, through that consistency of that kol demama daka, we're going to all have that privilege of meeting Elijah. And we're going to say, like, how'd you come up with that thing at Mount Carmel? It was beautiful. We're going to say, you know what, Elijah, you were wrong. Because you thought you could make these big miracles. You thought you could wow the people, and they would all be on your side. And they were for a day. And miracles have their place in history. We're not going into it so much, but there was a reason God had to split the sea. There was a reason God had to bring the 10 plagues. There was a reason for these miracles. It's supposed to be a supercharge. But if they're not backed up with a plan, they go right out the window. I'm sure everyone here at least one point in their life has been to a family simcha, whether it's a wedding or a bar mitzvah or whatever it might be. And, you know, these family simchas are fascinating things because for the men, they're not such a big deal. Like, we just basically, you know, the wedding is at 6 o'clock, at 5:59, we put our tie on, put our shoes on, and we go out to the wedding. But for the women, it's a little bit different. First of all, they buy their dresses specifically on purpose 2 sizes too small so that they have to get one of these special contraptions to be able to fit into it before the wedding. And you spend about 38 hours before the wedding getting ready for the wedding. You have to have the manicurist come and the makeup artist. By the way, Ofet can help you with that if you need help. You have the hairstylist come. And it's just hours upon hours of everything. And everything's got to be perfect. And then you go into the wedding. And then comes the most important part. The pictures. Right? The most important part is the pictures. You get ready for the pictures, everyone's stationed exactly right, with the light the right way, the smile the right way, and everything's just perfect, and you get all these wonderful pictures, and now the wedding's, oh yeah, you still gotta go to the chuppah and dance a little bit. What's the point of all that? We all have those days. We all have those days where we're sitting home, and we're in major schlump mode. You know, didn't get out of your pajamas all day, you're on your 3rd cup of coffee, sitting in front of the computer, watching Netflix, whatever it might be. And you're not feeling so good about yourself. And then you look up on the wall, and you see that picture of your family, looking so radiant and beautiful, looking their absolute best, and you realize how beautiful you can be. And therefore you realize how beautiful you are. That's the place of a miracle. The miracle is there to be an inspiration. The miracle is there to get us going. But if the miracle is not followed up with a kol demama daka, it's worthless and I don't believe in them. So yeah, we're in this 3rd time period for the Jewish people. We have the survival of the Jewish people, which is remarkable in and of itself, much greater than any of those. And then we just look at Israel and everything that goes on in Israel. And for those of us who are old enough to remember the wars that have happened, the Independence Day War, the 6-Day War, the 73 War, right? So the 6-Day War, we were saying, what was the response to the generals? Oh, we had the element of surprise. We knew what we were doing. We were smarter. We were greater. We were better. We defeated the whole Arab world. Then the Yom Kippur world comes. The Yom Kippur War comes. And you say, okay, you know what happens this time? We'll give them a 2-day head start and still we'll beat them. And then another war came. I remember it well. The Persian Gulf War, the first one. You had this guy named George Bush. You had this dictator named Saddam Hussein. The sequel came a few years later with George Bush and Saddam Hussein. And what happened there? Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait and takes over Kuwait so that he could destroy Israel. No one had ever heard of Kuwait before this point, but that's what he does. And George H.W. Bush says on the news, he says, Saddam Hussein, get out of Kuwait by January 15th. And Saddam Hussein figured he was safe because he thought George H.W. was talking to someone named Saddam and his name was Saddam, so he thought it was okay. Whatever it was, the war breaks out, and sure enough, as soon as it happens, Scuds start flying into Israel. Now, the Scud missiles were no duds. If you need any proof of that, just go look at the one that exploded in Saudi Arabia and killed 38 troops. These Scud missiles were no duds. A total of 39 Scud missiles were thrown into Israel in the period of a few days. And how many people died as direct result from the Scuds? 0. Buildings were knocked down. The area was decimated as far as physical structure, but the people all survived. So then what are you going to say? Okay, 6-Day War. We have surprise notice. We have advance notice. We have surprise attack. The element of surprise. 73 War. Give us a 2-day start. We'll still kill you. Iraqi War? Oh, we're just going to sit in a room and do nothing. You throw Scuds at us and we'll be okay. At what point do you say, no thanks God, I got it myself? Miracles don't work in part because we rationalize them away. There's miracles every single day in front of us. Problem is we get used to it. I always say, you want to see a miracle? Watch this. Right? Just again, we don't have any doctors in the room. Again, I'm questioning the Judaism of this room, but go talk to a doctor about how many things have to go right in the body to have a miracle. To have the body work. And then you have the fact that we're even here. Scientific American once wrote, and I think in 1985, 1987, they wrote the chances of a single bacteria being created by pure chance is the same probability of a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a 747 aircraft. We don't believe in miracles, right? So that's the problem. Number one, when the miracles happen, we rationalize them away. We find that one potential look at it to still say, you know what, I don't believe in it, it doesn't make sense. And then even when they do happen, and we accept it, we don't add to it the kol demama daka. And if we don't add the kol demama daka, then there is no reason to believe in miracles. So that's the lesson we have to take for ourselves. Miracles happen all the time. We have to be sensitive and aware enough to recognize them and identify them as what they're supposed to be, as the inspiration to get us started. And then when we have that inspiration, we have to turn around and add the kol demama daka, that esa keves achad taseh b'voker, v'esa keves hasheni taseh b'bein harbaim, that one sheep in the morning and one sheep in the afternoon, that one constant quiet voice. And that's where the miracles become real. And once we do that, then we can believe in miracles. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Dessert is served outside, and I'll be happy to hang around with any questions, comments, concerns that you might have to share with me. Thank you very much.
Doctor stands up.